Okay, so what I'd like to do today is finish off your notes on 5.3. You're actually starting your notes on 5.3, and that's all about classification and the binomial system of naming organisms. So it's all started off, kickstarted by a guy called Carl Linnaeus, or Carolus Linnaeus, as it says here, which is his proper Swedish name, but in English we call him Carl Linnaeus because um, kind of lazy. But he came up with a system for naming things, and this is obviously to help avoid confusion when we look at different species from around the world. So every organism will have a genus and it has a species. So you can see it has, and it's generally going to be in Latin. So you see here we have got Heliconius chiriphanus, which is for this butterfly, and the first part is the genus, the second part is the species, and it helps us to identify how closely related they are. So, like these two here, they are a subspecies, so they are very closely related. They've got the same genus, they've got the same species, and they've got an extra name at the end to show that they are a subspecies of each other. Now, as a subspecies, it means they could potentially interbreed. It may just be they're separated by distance. So here, one's in Puerto Rico, one's in Jamaica. The distance means they probably may not come across each other, but if they did, they could possibly interbreed with each other to have fertile offspring, which is generally the biological definition of a species, is that members can breed with each other and have offspring, which can then have further offspring. So it's all part of this binomial nomenclature, which sounds really fancy, but it just means it's a two-named naming system, binomial. So if you divide that up, it's two named, and nomenclature is just a naming system. So obviously, you as a living thing have got you've got your genus and you have got your species. Generally, it'll be written in italics, and you've got a capital letter on the first part of the genus, and the second one is going to be a lowercase. And it's the same for like even bacteria. So Escherichia coli is just written as E. coli, so some kind of can be abbreviated. If you've already used the full name in your text, so the first time you'd write it, you'd write Escherichia coli, and the second one you just put E. coli. So this has been adopted for over 100 years now. So Carl Linnaeus, he published it in 1758 for all the species known at the time because he wanted to classify things, which is kind of like a human trait. We want to give everyone like a little box that we can put it into. And since 1905, it's been accepted as a naming convention and it's used around the world. And the reason why is because sometimes in English we call things very similar. So like black tip reef shark, white tip reef shark, Caribbean reef shark tells us it's shark, but doesn't tell us how closely related they are to each other. So by looking at their binomial name, we can look at the genus and we can look at the species and work out which ones are closely related. Same thing goes like if you go to America and you go to Europe, they use the same word robin, but it's a completely different bird. So it have a completely different binomial name. So if we look here, question was to know which one closely related. You can tell that the one on the left, one on the right are very closely related. Well, they're related because they've got the same genus, but a different species, whereas the one in the middle, the white-tipped reef shark, is a different genus and species altogether. Same for like dogs. And with this one, you've got a little bit more information. So we can see that they're all of the same genus, and they're all the same. Two of them are the same species. In fact, some of them are subspecies, so they might, if they come into contact with each other, breed and produce fertile offspring. So the Tibetan wolf and domestic dog, same species, different subspecies. And you've also got Homo sapiens in there as well. But we're not closely related to dogs because we can tell from the name. So that's how we name things, but then we've got to think about how they've ended up with that name. How have we classified? Now, historically, we just had the five kingdoms, and you'd learn about those: your plant kingdom, your fungi kingdom, your animal, your protists, and your prokaryotes. But it's been reviewed because we found more information and changed it, so we have domains. So they've all got certain features. They keep the same, but it goes back to like the types of cell that we have. So your archaea are kind of what would have been in the old prokaryotes. Your archaea are generally extremophiles. They grow in volcanic springs or very hot water, very hot salt concentrations. They don't have a nuclear membrane, but their emphasis is just floating around in the cell. But the RNA and the biochemistry is very different from bacteria. Whereas bacteria, the ones we traditionally know, your cell, your plasmids and the DNA floating around in the middle. Um, and then your eukaryotes, where you have got the membrane bound organelles and you've got your nuclear membrane bound up in there. So we have the domain right at the top, and it's just a way of sorting it. So from the domain, it'll then be put into a kingdom. So, like if we think of the clownfish here, it belongs to the eukaryotes. It's going to be in the animal kingdom. Chordata generally means it's going to be a backbone, and then we go to the class, the order, the family, the genus, and then the species at the end. So instead of calling it clownfish, it's Amphiprion Ocellaris, which makes me sound like Harry Potter, to be honest. And that's where a lot of the Harry Potter spells come from. It's the Latin, and it's the same thing here for this. So the if you think about the naming system, it's domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and subspecies. Okay.